There we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Anita Parker. I'm one of the educational developers at the Center for Teaching and Learning. I'm seeing lots and lots of familiar faces in the participant list. Hello, if we have met already. Hello, if our paths haven't crossed yet, but know that our paths can cross today and continue crossing in the future. Thank you for making time to be here today. The title of our Wednesday webinar today is Well-Written Effective Learning Outcomes, Key Strategies and Examples. Our focus today is going to be on course level learning outcomes. By the end of this webinar, here's some learning outcomes for you. Maybe not by the end of the webinar, but after you've had some time to digest the information and go through your own existing learning outcomes if you have them. But hopefully by the end of the webinar, you'll feel that you're on the path to list and explain the various levels of learning outcomes, describe the importance and characteristics of a well-written course learning outcome, select and apply verbs that are measurable and conducive to student demonstration, and to determine aligning assessments and activities that provide evidence of student mastery of those learning outcomes. Like an onion or like this funnel here, there are several layers of learning outcomes based on their specificity and their function. Institutional level, sometimes these are mandated by an external accrediting body. These are sometimes called graduate attributes or generic attributes. Faculty level, program level. Here we are today at course level learning outcomes, and you can get even deeper and more specific module or unit level, lesson level, and even activity. If you really, really like writing learning outcomes, you can write them for your activity level as well. Here at the University of Alberta, we do have institutional level learning outcomes. Not everyone is aware of these. These are called attributes, and each of them has several sub-attributes. The report where these come from is in the reference section at the end of my slides today. These are the attributes that the university feels that students from any discipline will have obtained by the time they finish their program. Ethical responsibility, scholarship, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, and confidence. Lots of C words in there. Here, I'll take a tangent for a question. This is a common question when we talk about course level outcomes or any level of outcomes is what is the difference between an outcome and an objective. Often the terms are used interchangeably, and just don't stress too much if you call something an objective but you're not sure if it's an objective or an outcome. It doesn't matter, but perhaps the easiest distinction is that learning outcomes sometimes are called goals, or objectives are goals. Objectives, sometimes called goals. Objectives can be stepping stones towards larger goals. They are broad statements about the purpose of a course, and they're written from the instructor's perspective, or what the instructor intends to do. And there's really no indication of how this is going to happen or how the instructor will know how it's been achieved. So in the example on the right, you can see that I've used the word introduce. It's the action of the instructor to introduce certain key concepts to students. Learning outcomes, however, are clear statements about what the learner is expected to be able to know or be able to demonstrate by the end of whenever a course or program, whatever the time is. And they are written from the student's perspective. So on the right, you can see that I have used the word explain. It's the students that are doing the explaining, not the instructor. Overall, just don't get too caught up in the difference between the two. Instead, see the value of designing and delivering a course by what you wish for students to get out of it. at the end. Learning outcomes are the first step of the backward design process for a course. Backward design is the method of aligning activities and assessments with the desired learning outcomes in mind. And the 3 steps are: number 1, to identify desired results. Those are your outcomes. Then number 2, you determine acceptable evidence. Those are your assessments. And number 3, you plan learning experiences and instruction. Those are your activities. And building a course with learning outcomes in mind can promote student engagement and motivation because students know what is expected of them. And alternatively, misalignment between these 3 levels can result in frustration. Why is it important to have course level learning outcomes? They provide a roadmap for instructors and for students as well. For instructors, they can inform your planning, your delivery, the creation or curation of resources, the order that you put activities in. For students, they know what's expected of them, how to be successful in a course. And for both instructors and students, it can facilitate self-reflection. The overall characteristics of a course level learning outcome is that it describes what the learner is expected to know and or be able to do by the end of a course, provides a framework for the lower levels of learning outcomes. Think of that funnel we just looked at, the module level or the activity level. And also then think of the funnel to the higher levels. The course level outcomes align with the higher levels of the program, the faculty, and the institutional level. So it's just like putting a puzzle together. A well-written course level learning outcome is SMART. I know you've seen this acronym before in other contexts, but it works in this context as well. S is for specific, as specific as it needs to be for a course level, not too much, not too little. We saw that course level was in the Goldilocks place on the funnel. And also the S can stand for speaks to the learner. That's that difference between an outcome and an objective. M is for measurable. We'll spend time there today when we talk about different verbs that are accessible and that students can demonstrate. They are demonstrable. A is for attainable. Synonyms are that they're realistic, appropriate. R is for relevant, and T is for time-bound. Time-bound here is just the end of the course, and transparent. That's let's share them with the student. These are not secret. Let's make students aware of what's expected of them. So here is a well-written learning outcome from a second-year biology course. By the end of the course, students will be able to explain and compare how classical and molecular techniques are used to study genes and chromosomes. SMART, is it SMART? Specific, looks pretty specific for a course level, speaks to the learner. Explain and compare are good verbs. That's the M, measurable. Attainable, I assume so. R, relevant, looks pretty relevant to me. T, time-bound, end of the course. T, transparent, as long as you share it with students, you're good. So overall, this is a SMART, well-written learning outcome. Here it is again from the last slide. By the end of the course, I've put in red the measurable verbs, and I've highlighted in blue the noun phrase. The noun phrase is what makes it a course level outcome. That it is a key concept. It's a big concept. It's not so specific for a lesson or even a module. It's not so general that it's a faculty or program level. It's right. The noun phrase is what makes it at the course level. How about verbs? Here are the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I know you've seen this before as well. And notice that even the levels of Bloom's itself are verbs. And within at each level, suggested verbs that you can use that would work well in learning outcomes are suggested. So for example, if you want students to remember stuff, you could ask them to define, list, state. If you want students to understand stuff, we'll talk more about understand understand in a moment, you could ask them to be able to discuss, to explain, to identify, apply and analyze. Have a look at the green ones there. Students are solving, demonstrating, comparing, contrasting. Higher up, evaluating, creating. Students are getting into some tougher stuff to do. They're critiquing and constructing, etc. So this resource, I use this image in particular all the time in my slides. This, you can see at the bottom there, it's from Vanderbilt University Center for Teaching and Learning. It's free for it's the CC licensing on it is you just can use it as much as you need. So if you haven't come across this one yet, you can search that one up for yourself. Okay, some verbs are better than others. Here are verbs to avoid because they're not easily measured. They're passive, internal to the student, and generally unobservable. How about this first one? Understand. If students are going to demonstrate their understanding, how are they going to do this? If you find yourself using the verb understand, is there a better verb that you can use that's more active and external and observable? Things like explain, discuss, describe, etc. And then I won't read through the slide here. I'll just give you a minute to kind of glance over them and see that in general, these are things that would be really hard to measure if you're designing an activity or an assessment. So you might be thinking, well, this is just getting real picky. But really, the careful selection of verbs is a great tool in selecting and building activities and assessments that will lead students to your outcomes. I have 5 quick examples for you to click through. Where there's something wrong with the one on the left, let's figure out what's wrong with it and then figure out just a little way to modify it and make it better. But this first one I have in red, have received. By the end of the course, students will have received something. What's wrong with that? It's not specific to the student. If they have received something, it's the action of the instructor that has given them that something. So could you rewrite it a little bit? By the end of the course, students will be able to describe or explain, or is there some other verb that you can use there? Number 2, students are asked to flawlessly execute something, likely not realistic. Watch how this is the R on the SMART acronym. Watch how you word this. If you put flawlessly execute, this one's a bit silly. I can't see you putting that. But by the end of the course, students will be able to demonstrate competency in some kind of skill. And here's where you would also, along with the learning outcome, have a rubric that would help you determine the levels of competency that the students have attained. Example 3 of 5, I've just used the word understand here. By the end of the course, students will understand something. Hard to measure. Can you change it? Are they discussing, explaining, identifying, listing, recalling? Well, you can go back to that Bloom's taxonomy for something more specific on understand. How about this one? 4 of 5. Nothing wrong with the red here. List. That's an okay verb at a lower Bloom's. Apply, demonstrate. I feel like though this is like 3 learning outcomes in one. It's very wordy. I've rewritten it a little bit, but it could arguably still be 2 learning outcomes in the modification here. By the end of the students will be able to apply principles of something and demonstrate competency in something. So a common question with course level learning outcomes is, well, how many do I need? There really isn't a magic number, but it's not too many, not too little. If you're wanting to have around 4 to 6 course level learning outcomes, it seems to be a good number from my experience. And so then you might be tempted to try and pack too much into those ones. And if you find yourself doing that, maybe you're actually writing some module or lesson or activity learning outcomes instead. And then 5 of 5, I've just used another one of those dirty dozen verbs that are hard to measure. By the end of the course, students will appreciate. How do you know that they appreciate? How are they going to show their appreciation? Maybe they're going to explain or reflect or do some kind of communicating to you through text or audio to show that they are appreciating something. So I hope this helps. Just some examples where we say, write it like this, don't write it like this. And, we put all kinds of rules on it. So I'm hoping this will be a bit of a template to get you started. So here we are in step 1. We have our sample outcome. By the end of the course, students will be able to explain. I took away the genetic stuff, just put a noun phrase about whatever you happen to be teaching. What are assessments and activities that will align with that? There's a lot of crossover in assessments and activities, depending on if you're going to take it in for part of the student grade or not. But let's just see what explain looks like when you're designing these kinds of things. For assessments, maybe it's a homework assignment, a written homework assignment where there's not just a one-word answer or a one-letter answer, but there's an explain in it. Students are showing their thought process, they're showing the steps of their problem solving, and they're explaining how they came to their conclusion, their final answer. Maybe the explaining is auditory, it's verbal, and students are creating a video for you, maybe individually, maybe as a group, and they are using their own voice box to do some explaining about a concept in the course. Here's a multiple choice question that can be used for students to explain something. Now, not really, because it's you doing the explaining while you're creating the multiple choice question, but students are choosing from a list of possible explanations. They're choosing the correct answers. So nicer in a larger class where you want to use some multiple choice and have this auto-graded feature. These are usually longer, they're harder to write, but you can write them with a template like this, where you provide like a reading, something that students have seen in class through, or you've changed the inputs a little bit, and their correct answer is X because of explanation 1. Maybe it's Y because of 2. You can see the format here. So you can have students sort of explaining on multiple choice questions. What about in class for activities? Maybe the first one on the left could be a talk and turn. We have 2 minutes. Turn to your neighbor and talk out loud about what you think the answer is and why. Maybe it's the one on the right, a presentation. You have students working in groups, and near the end of the class, you have a representative come up and present something to the class, explain what that group has been working on. So you can see here that the explaining is coming by students moving their hands to write text on a piece of paper, or type it on a screen, or have it come out of their own mouths. Okay, so where do you go from here? I want to introduce this document to you because writing learning outcomes is challenging. A 10-minute webinar with me talking quickly to fit it all in 10 minutes isn't going to be too helpful, but we have a document for that on our CTL website. It's easy to find if you start digging into the resources, but I've put a bit.ly here so you can have it and just type it in and it'll take you right there. The booklet takes you through exactly what I've been talking about in a nutshell, but it's a bit longer. I think it's like about 60 pages, but there are pages where you do your own work. You take yourself through your own process to develop your learning outcomes. And once you have a few under your belt, they become easier and easier to write. So I'll go back to that screen for a moment if you want to get to that bit.ly. Exhale. And that's it. That's all I have for you today in our very quick and dirty 10-minute webinar on what are the ingredients and a little bit about verbs, about how to write some, and the importance of the course level learning outcomes. Here's the references to that can be helpful for you as you get started.